Hello and welcome to our SmartMatch overview. In this video, we will discuss what SmartMatch is, how it works, and how you can use it to optimize your translation process. SmartMatch is a feature that is unique to Smartling and that can help you get the most out of your translation management platform. Before we'll dive right in, let's take a look at the concept of a translation memory, which is at the core of our SmartMatch feature. A translation memory, or TM, is a database where all translations that get saved by your linguists will be stored, so they can be easily reused in the future. Here's how it works. When you send some content to Smartling, it automatically gets broken down into smaller units called strings. A string typically corresponds to a paragraph in your file or on your web page. Larger strings with more than one sentence are broken down further for your translators into so-called segments. A segment typically corresponds to a sentence within your paragraph. This way of splitting up the content makes the translation process easier and more efficient for your translators. They can enter a translation for each individual segment instead of having to work on a large block of text all at once. Whenever a translation for a segment gets saved by a linguist, it is automatically stored in your translation memory, so it can be reused at a later point. Smartling instantly recognizes if some of your new content is similar or even identical to a segment stored in your translation memory, and the previous translation will be shown to the translator as a suggestion. The translator can then insert and reuse the existing translation as is, or make just some small tweaks. These suggestions, which are also called translation memory matches or fuzzy matches, are essential when it comes to promoting consistency across all of your translation jobs. They also help speed up the translation process because your translators only need to make small adjustments to an existing translation. The more similar the match, the less time the translators need to spend on it. That being said, even if the exact same text has already been translated before, a human translator still needs to check and save the pre-existing translation from a fuzzy match. So you might want to automate this process further, and this is where SmartMatch comes into play. SmartMatch is an additional feature that will apply and submit an existing translation from your translation memory in a fully automated way. Here's how it works. When you authorize a new string for translation, SmartMatch automatically checks your translation memory for a possible match. If the same text has already been translated before and is available in your translation memory, the previous translation will be applied and submitted automatically. So if the SmartMatch feature is activated, all of this is done by Smartling. No human translator needs to be involved in applying the match at all. Depending on your preferences, you can either send the SmartMatch translation to a revision step if you would like an editor or reviewer to run a final check on it, or you can send it directly to the published step and mark it as completed. SmartMatches bypass the translators, and because of that, they can help you realize great cost and time savings. But we also want to make sure that your translation quality doesn't suffer, so there are some considerations to bear in mind. SmartMatch is a string-level action. Going back to the content structure in Smartling, larger strings might be broken down into separate segments or sentences for your translators. In order for SmartMatch to kick in, you need to have a translation available in your memory for the entire string. If there is an existing translation available for just one segment, SmartMatch does not kick in. This is because we don't want to SmartMatch only one sentence within a paragraph and potentially take it out of context. Another way of ensuring good quality matches is by only reusing translations that have previously gone through the full workflow and have reached the published step. SmartMatch only works if your previous translation has been fully completed and is sitting in the published step. This ensures that we don't automatically reuse translations that haven't been fully proofread and might be incorrect. If you ever do want translations to be used as potential smart matches before they reach the published step, you can pre-publish them. Pre-published translations are still in progress in your workflow, but they can already be reused as smart matches for other strings with the same source text. Smart matches bypass your translators completely, and the previous translation gets applied automatically. This means that the quality of your previous translations is a very important factor to consider. You can think of SmartMatch as a magnifying glass when it comes to translation quality. If your translation memory only contains great quality translations, SmartMatch will help you reuse them at a larger scale and reduce the risk of potentially incorrect retranslations. On the other hand, if the previous translations stored in your translation memory aren't good, or maybe are even incorrect, SmartMatch will keep propagating any mistakes that your translators may have made in the past. For this reason, SmartMatches should only be sent directly to the published step if you can fully trust the quality of your translation memory. If you are not sure about the quality of the translation stored in your translation memory, we would recommend sending your SmartMatches to an editing or review step instead, so a human proofreader can run a final check on them. Please just bear in mind that if you want to send SmartMatches to an editing step or to a review step, you need to have this exact type of step set up in your workflow. If SmartMatch does not find a corresponding step in your workflow, it will automatically publish any matches. To configure SmartMatch, please click into your project details page, where you can access the linguistic package for your project. Here you can find the leverage configuration that determines which translation memories your project is reading from. For each of the translation memories listed here, you can configure exactly if and how you would like any previous translations to SmartMatch. Simply click on the link that says either enabled or disabled. You can now see a range of 7 SmartMatch configuration settings that can be fully customized to your needs. If you don't want to use SmartMatch for a given translation memory, you simply need to make sure that all of these 7 settings are set to disabled, and then click Save Changes. Your translators can now still see suggestions from this translation memory, but SmartMatch will not be used. If you would like to enable SmartMatch, you can choose the exact settings that work best for you. Let's start with the 2 most commonly used settings, text with variant and text without variant. Both of these settings allow SmartMatch to apply and submit a translation if there is a 100% match available in your translation memory. This means that the exact same text has been translated before. So what's the difference between the 2 settings? Text without variant only checks if the same text was translated before, regardless of the context in which the previous translation was used. Text with variant, on the other hand, only works if the previous translation was used in the same context. To use a more technical term, this setting only kicks off the SmartMatch process if the previous translation was using the same variant. A variant is an identifier that allows Smartling to distinguish between 2 strings that have the same source text, but that are used in a different context or in a different place on your website. For example, the string home could be referring to your home page or to a house that you want to sell. Most languages would probably use 2 very different translations for these 2 use cases. And this is where variants come into play. As an added piece of meta information, 2 different variants allow us to treat these 2 instances of the same source text as 2 completely separate strings. This helps your translators choose the correct wording based on the context, and we can also store 2 different translations in your translation memory. Depending on the file type that you are using, variants can be created in different ways. Most commonly, for file types that use keys, the key is also used as the variant. So circling back to our SmartMatch setting text with variant, this is how it works. If your previous translation was using a different variant, the new string does not SmartMatch, even if the source text is exactly the same. This ensures that we don't automatically apply a translation that was used in a different context. In our example, distinguishing between the two different variants helps us avoid reusing the translation for the home that you want to sell as the translation for home as in homepage. On the other hand, if the same text was translated before using the same variant as your new string, SmartMatch does kick in and the previous translation is applied automatically. If neither your previous translation nor your new string are using any variants at all, we will interpret this as a matching variant, and we will get a SmartMatch as well. In contrast, the setting text without variant works in all of these three scenarios. This option only checks if the text matches, regardless of the context or variant. To stay on the safe side, we would recommend sending any SmartMatches for text without variant to a revision step, so a proofreader can check if the previous translation still works in the new context. As the setting text with variant already takes the context of your translations into account, this can be sent directly to the published step if you are using file types with variants. Next, let's take a look at some additional settings that can help you get even more SmartMatches for further time and cost savings. With regular SmartMatches for text with variant or text without variant, your new content needs to have all the same formatting elements as the string stored in your translation memory. The spacing, capitalization, and formatting tags all need to match. Otherwise, SmartMatch doesn't work. These next 4 settings are an exception to this rule. They allow you to reuse an existing translation for the same text, even if some formatting elements are different in the new string. With the setting text ignoring whitespace, you will get a SmartMatch if the same text has been translated before, even if the spacing around the words has changed. Any extra spaces are simply ignored. Here's how it works. If the previous text contains some extra white spaces, the new string with regular spacing SmartMatches, and the previous translation gets applied. Or vice versa, if the new string contains some extra spaces, it also SmartMatches, even if the previous string used regular spacing. The only exception here are non-breaking spaces. They are considered an actual character, so if some non-breaking spaces have been added, SmartMatch doesn't work. The next setting, text ignore markup, works in a similar way, but instead of ignoring extra spaces, it ignores differences in HTML formatting tags. For the purpose of this SmartMatch setting, we are only looking at so-called inline tags, which mark up a formatting style around a word or a group of words, such as italics, bold tags, or hyperlinks. In order for SmartMatch to work, the new string needs to have the same text as the one stored in the translation memory, but these inline formatting tags can be different. There are 2 main use cases for this setting. Firstly, it works if the new string uses the same formatting style as the translation memory entry, but the formatting markers or tags are placed in a different position. In our example, the new string still uses HTML tags to indicate some bold formatting, but instead of marking up the entire sentence, the tags are now wrapped around the word Smartling. With the setting text ignore markup, this string will SmartMatch and the previous translation will be applied. This SmartMatch setting also works if the tags indicate a different type of formatting. For example, if the string stored in the translation memory was using some bold tags, the new string with italic styling will SmartMatch, and the tags will be intelligently adjusted to reflect the new formatting. So even though the translation memory entry had bold tags, the SmartMatched string will correctly display the new italic formatting. The new tags can even be placed in a different position, as long as the overall structure of the string stays the same. In our example, the string from our translation memory has some text, then an opening tag to indicate the beginning of the bold formatting style, then some text in between the tags, and finally a closing tag to mark the end of the bold formatting style. In order for SmartMatch to work with different formatting tags, the new string needs to have this same structure: text opening tag, text closing tag. If the new formatting is moved to a different position, where the order of the text and tags no longer matches the string from the translation memory, SmartMatch does not work. This also means that if your new string doesn't have any formatting tags at all, but the previous one did, SmartMatch does not work. And vice versa, if your previous string didn't have any HTML tags at all, but your new content does, you don't get any SmartMatches either. So to summarize, it's only the HTML within the angle brackets that can be different, but the number and overall structure of tags need to stay the same in order for this SmartMatch setting to work. Let's move on to the next setting. Text ignore case allows you to ignore differences in uppercase and lowercase spelling. Normally, SmartMatch is case sensitive. If the text stored in your translation memory is using uppercase letters, your new string also needs to be in uppercase letters in order to SmartMatch. However, there might be some use cases where you want to ignore differences in uppercase or lowercase spelling. The setting text ignore case allows you to do just that. You can match a lowercase string against an uppercase entry from your translation memory, or vice versa. Please just bear in mind that the case won't be automatically adjusted when SmartMatch kicks in. So if you have an uppercase translation stored in your translation memory, and this is used as a SmartMatch for your new lowercase string, you will still see an uppercase translation. If you really want to prioritize cost and time savings by getting even more SmartMatches, you can use the setting Match Any. Match Any combines the three settings that we just looked at and ignores extra spaces, different formatting tags, and differences in upper or lowercase. All of these settings that ignore certain formatting elements could potentially compromise your translation quality. For this reason, we would recommend either keeping them disabled or setting them to a revision step. Especially if you decide to ignore differences in upper and lowercase spelling, it is important that the proofreader is going to adjust the SmartMatch translations to the correct case, so your translation memory won't be compromised. Last but not least, let's take a look at the SmartMatch setting called Restore Translation. If a translation was saved but then discarded while it was still in progress in your workflow, you can use this setting to restore it at a later point. This comes in handy if you accidentally delete a file or cancel a job, stop or exclude a translation while it is still being worked on. This setting automatically applies the translation that had been saved before the string was removed or cancelled. For example, if a file was partially still in progress when it got deleted by mistake, this SmartMatch setting can help us restore any translations that had been saved and send them back to the editing step. First, the file needs to be re-uploaded to Smartling using the same file name or namespace. It can then be authorized for translation again. SmartMatch automatically applies the previous translations so they show up directly in the editing step, and the file doesn't need to be translated from scratch a second time. Any strings that had already reached the published step before the file got removed will reappear directly in the published step, and they don't even need to go through the SmartMatch process. This Restore Translation option works a bit differently from all other SmartMatch settings. It is the only setting that will use unpublished translations from your translation memory. It is meant to restore only the exact string that the translation was initially saved for. It will not apply this translation to any other strings, so you don't have to worry about propagating unreviewed translations across your entire project. As the translation had not gone through the full workflow before it was cancelled or stopped, we would not recommend having this type of SmartMatch go straight to the published step. By doing so, you would run the risk of publishing unreviewed translations. Instead, we would suggest enabling this feature only in those specific cases when you need to restore the translation for some content that was cancelled or removed by mistake. We would highly recommend sending this type of SmartMatch to a revision step so your proofreaders can complete their regular workflow. If you send SmartMatches to a revision step, it might take some time for the translation to be fully reviewed and proofread before it actually reaches the published step. This is why you will see an additional checkbox here that allows you to pre-publish the SmartMatch translations. Pre-publishing means that the unreviewed SmartMatches appear straight away on your website or in your translated files. Your proofreaders can still check the SmartMatches in due course and make any updates to the translations as needed. We would recommend using this setting only for content that is very time sensitive and only if you can fully trust the quality of your translation memory. In our Help Center, you can find more information about the pre-publishing feature and how it works for your integration. Now that we have configured all of these settings, when can we expect to see some SmartMatches? Like every translation, SmartMatches get applied in the translation step of your workflow. This means that your content needs to be authorized in order for SmartMatch to work. As soon as a match is found, the string automatically leaves the translation step, often in a matter of seconds. Your translation memory is a living document. You will often have many translation jobs in progress at the same time, and they all contribute to a growing database of translation records. For this reason, Smartling continuously checks for possible new matches. Whenever a translation reaches the published step, we run a search in the background to see if there is another untranslated string currently in progress that has the same source text. Provided that all criteria for your configuration settings are met, SmartMatch automatically kicks in and applies the newly published translation. Of course, SmartMatch only works if no other translation has been saved by your linguists for the new string yet. If you need more information about SmartMatch in general and each individual setting, please feel free to visit our Help Center, where you can find further guidance and detailed explanations. Thank you very much for your time today, and happy smart matching!